Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today's episode brought to you by Lupine Lights. Lupine Lights, the finest lights I've ridden throughout my career, and I've been riding them since 2019. With Bluetooth technology to connect to your headlamp, you can work through each of the modes anywhere on your person, whether if you're running them up on your head or, of course, if you're running them on your bars. If you want to save 24% on your next order of Lupine Lights, use the code LupineLights24. Now let's get into the butterfly effect. What do I want to talk about today? Well, we got to go back into yesterday's stage 15. It was magnificent. I mean, edge of the Chesterfield watching, viewing the whole time. If you're old enough like me, you believe that this is as good as any Thursday night television show you've ever watched. It's fantastic viewing on yesterday's stage 15 of the Vuelta a España. But what did Primoz Roglic, what did BORA Hansgrohe do wrong? Let's back it up before the stage. Let's go into the team bus and figure out what BORA Hansgrohe were telling their team as the director sportif's talking. So in the bus, you have the director sportif sitting up there. He's like, we got this great plan. We're going to come in just before the last hardest climb of the Vuelta a España that we've had in 15 days of racing, and it's going to finish in Summit today, stage 15, with a 19-kilometer climb that the last 3 kilometers on it's going to reach 24%. So we want Primoz Roglic to be able to jump onto his bike with a one-by. Why would you want to ride one-by? First off, I would never want to ride one-by while I'm racing a pro event if you're going up and you're going downhill. So you need to have one kind of terrain. It has to be either completely flat, it has to be either completely up, or it has to be completely down. But you don't want two of those situations affecting you if you're riding one bike because they don't have enough gear selection. Now, when I was racing pro, especially back in the day when we're running 7 speeds and 8 speed, I was racing when there were 6 speeds, but when we're running 7 and 8s, you still change the cassette back there to get the perfect gearing so your RPM speed of your pedals is always exactly what you want in the situation. When you're climbing, it's going to be a little bit less RPM, unless you're Primoz Roglic. Some of those guys run 100 RPM regardless of which direction they're going, up, down, flat, or whatever it is when they're sprinting. But normally, most normal professionals have some issues when they go uphill, so the RPM drops a little bit, but they want to stay at that 70, 80, 90 kind of cadence. And when you're on the flats, you're running more around 80, 90, 110. So you always have about a 10, 20 RPM difference. I like to stand a lot on my climb, so if you watch me, I'm probably running 70 RPM. It's pretty slow because I prefer standing on the steep climbs where riders prefer to sit, most of them. I was a rarity. Myself, Alberto Contador stood a bit, but not quite as much as I did. So when you're putting a one-by on, you have to make sure that the climb is super steep. That's what's happening on stage 15. So Primoz Roglic, director sportif in the bus, says, hey, we have to change bikes, put them on the one-by. The problem that they didn't predict is the what-ifs that can happen on yesterday's stage. Now, normally you come into the last climb on a long flat section of road that's straight, just wide, and you're coming in there. You got a peloton of 70 riders, 22 teams probably represented up in the front group. I didn't see any teams missing, but there could have been one. But with every team up there represented, you got about 22 teams back there of cars. Now, normally you come into a race that hasn't been incredibly difficult, like yesterday's stage 15, narrow, technical, twisty, ups, downs, lefts, rights, everything you could ask for in a bike race. It had in yesterday's stage 15. It was magnificent. I've told you many times. But the problem that causes is the peloton's blown up. Now, instead of having 2 cars in the professional peloton following behind the GC group, minus whichever cars would be up following the 6 riders in the front, that Jay Vine was drilling at full gas coming into the last and final climb of yesterday's stage 15. You have 6 riders up there, so you have few teams that could possibly have been up there, but every time I looked, it looked more like it was Shimano following that group. So there could have been riders in between that had gotten dropped out of that group that was originally 23 that was holding up the cars. So they might not have had their cars up there, but they might have been in front of the GC group. Why am I spending so much time on this? It's important. Once we get into 23 kilometers to go, though, almost 24, Primoz Roglic decides to take a nature break. Movistar's jumping on the front. What's that mean? Well, it means you got some fresh legs. Those guys are going full gas. So this is what the director sportif in the bus, when he was saying, hey guys, we're going to switch bikes at 24, 25 kilometers to go. But don't worry, we're going to be 100% prepared. We're going to have both cars ready to service their Primoz Roglic. Okay, well, go back into my story of what the director sportif forgot to tell the guys and didn't predict when he's talking to Primoz Roglic and saying this might be a good idea to change bikes. When it's technical and coming down and it's all split up and the peloton's blown up to pieces, the cars could be held up behind the GC riders of the riders back there that have gotten dropped. Now, what that's happening is when we come in to Primoz Roglic pulling over at around 23 plus kilometers to go, we'll see that his car comes flying in there, stops, and they're giving him a bike change. His second car is going to pass him. It was the number 2 car, not the second car, but the number 2 car that stopped. The number 1 car passed him. Once Primoz Roglic gets pushed, we see the number 1 car waiting in front right there with Roger. Now, this is the problem that they didn't predict in the riders' meeting in the bus, is that there's not enough cars following behind the peloton of about 70 riders, with Movistar going full gas and along with, of course, Soudal Quickstep going full gas. They're both knuckleheads at this moment. But Bora Hansgrohe didn't predict that there's not going to be enough cars there. So now with their number 1 car towing on the bumper, Primoz Roglic, he's going to get a time penalty. Now, the only thing that saves him at this moment is that they docked him and penalized him 20 seconds at this moment instead of just doing a barrage. If the race official, the red car, had hit the brakes on Bora Hansgrohe at that moment, Primoz Roglic would have been in big-time problems. So the what-ifs that they didn't predict for in the riders' meeting when the director sportif said in the team bus, this is going to be a great plan and we're going to get him a fresh bike with the perfect gearing to go up this climb. 1x might be the perfect gearing when you start going up the 24% section, but it's not worth the risk. And as I told you yesterday on the butterfly effect, 2x will get you up 24%. I know because I did it in 2013. So once you come into that change, once the officials, if they had done a blockade because they knew Primoz Roglic was getting a technical advantage and it wasn't just a mishap, normally the officials throughout my whole time of racing, they were a little bit more friendlier to riders being on the bus and on the bumper of the car than they are nowadays. They would even let you hold on a bit more, but there was always if you had a technical problem, not because you want to get a technical advantage on all of your colleagues up there who are now going full gas, single file, in the front of the peloton, trying to do damage control to the J Vine leg group up there that's soon going to be led by Sivakov once the climb starts proper. Well, Bora Hansgrohe, you see the cars shuffle and they pass each other. And then once the second car comes back around that serviced the bike, he comes back around, passes Primoz Roglic, slots in front of car number 1. Then the red car's up there, but we see the Bora Hansgrohe rider with 3 riders, pass, and they're going to get onto the back there of the peloton. Then the number 1 car from Bora Hansgrohe is going to pass again. They're going to go all the way up to Vlasov up there, who's in the breakaway. Now, you see Vlasov up there, he's flipping his earpiece out. Why is he doing that? Well, he can't hear clear with the wind coming through and the noise and the director's yelling out the window. Why he didn't use the radio, I don't know. But Vlasov goes over to that number 1 car there, then shakes his head, pulls back. Number 1 car will stay behind Vlasov the whole time. Why am I telling you this? Well, remember, when Primoz Roglic had not 1, but 2 cars to make sure it was as flawless as possible of a bike change, Vlasov's up in the front group. So if Vlasov's in the front group and the 2 cars are behind back there with Bora Hansgrohe's Primoz Roglic, Vlasov doesn't have a car back there if he has a mechanical. He only has the service vehicle from Shimano, and that never works. It could get you to the finish line, but it's never going to keep you in the front group when Sivakov's going full gas on the front of the climb, and it's an HC climb and the hardest climb that we've had throughout the Volta a España. So by Bora Hansgrohe in the riders' meeting in the bus, when the director sportif is saying this will be flawless, it's anything but flawless. The what-ifs are too hard to predict. You take the second car away from Vlasov, he doesn't have a car up there to service him if he runs into a mechanical problem. We all saw how technical and difficult and twisty the whole stage of stage 15 was. So anything could happen at any moment to Vlasov. We saw back there that the next what-if was that the peloton could be blown up. There's cars certainly following the Gruppetto group, so instead of having 2 cars each following in the GC group, there's only going to be most likely 1 car each and possibly 2 for the GC favorites. But all the time, once the groups are getting dropped, certainly they got to be serviced at some point in time. So the size of the caravan back there is going to be cut in half. And that's why Primoz Roglic has that gap in front of him, and why the director sportif now has to put Primoz Roglic on the bumper and cost him 20 seconds. It was something that they should have thought about in the bus. Hey, if it was an incredibly difficult stage, if the caravan's cut half in size, if we need a car that's up there following behind Vlasov, it's too risky to have Primož Roglič just have the absolute perfect gearing for the last 24% section of today's stage 15. It was ridiculous in the bus in the director's meeting for him to say, hey, this might work out. Now maybe it was Primož Roglic's ideal to switch bikes. We see in this interview today talking about the 22nd time penalty he took. He wasn't happy with it, but he didn't say anything bad about it because he knows he's on the bumper and he's getting a technical advantage. It wasn't a technical mishap. The officials went easy on him, I believe, up here on the butterfly effect and beyond the coverage, making him have only 20 seconds added to his time. So now he needs to make up 1 minute and 3 seconds on Ben O'Connor. We're all sitting here watching today's episode, and I would imagine if you watch Primož Roglič enough that you would believe that Primož Roglič can take back 1 minute and 3 seconds. We all believe that, I think is true. But will Primož Roglič get a flat tire? That may never happen. Well, it just did on a couple stages back. He might have some fines and some penalties added to him. That's never happened. It just happened yesterday, so that can happen. Tactically, they ride perfect tactically. They won't need to have any kind of buffer on anybody. Well, we saw that on stage 6. That's why yesterday's stage 15 was such a knucklehead tactical ride, having 2 riders in that front break, with Vlasov and Danny Martinez being part of that original 23-rider group. If Pseudo Quickstep doesn't get on the front. Now, you're saying, Chris, ifs, ands, and buts. This is a lot of possible ifs right now, because if Pseudo Quickstep doesn't get on the front, if they realize that Primož Roglič has to still take the race leader's red jersey away from Ben O'Connor in stage 15, and they decide, we don't want to ride the front. We look at Vlasov in that front group. He's 4.5 minutes back on the time of Sivakov. Sivakov's only 6.5 minutes back on the time of Ben O'Connor, so that puts him at just over 6 minutes back from the time of Primož Roglič. He's already 3 minutes up the road. If Pseudo Quickstep just say, hey, we don't want to ride on the front, and we know it can happen. It happened on stage 6. That's exactly what happened on stage 6. So when we look at stage 15, the ifs, ands, and buts are ridiculous to go into that stage and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and let this group go up the road. We're going to hope another team chases. Luckily for BORA Hansgrohe, it was Pseudo Quickstep that got on the front and did the work. Now let me go into one other thing that we'll talk about when we look at the officials allowing Primož Roglič to sit on the bumper there. Now they would allow him to sit on the bumper because, as I told you, they believe it's not a technical advantage, but a technical mishap. They would not have known necessarily that he switched to a bike with a 1x and was just trying to get advantage on everybody. So they allowed him to sit on the bumper. They gave him the 20-second bonus, or 20-second penalty. But if they barraged him, and if Primož Roglič is back there with Danny Martinez, whose legs have already blown on this stage 15 because he was so aggressive, if Adria up there doesn't have quite fantastic form, which I don't believe he's going to have the kind of form to be able to close that gap, all of a sudden now they have to pick out the 2 riders in the front group there of the GC favorites. They have to pick out Lipovets to come back and Giovanni to come back and help Primož Roglič close that gap. Now, why is that important? Well, Lipovets had a fantastic ride on this last and final climb here of stage 15 and salvaged the day for Primož Roglič. But if he had to go back and salvage the technical advantage that Primož Roglič was getting because the officials barraged the road and Lipovets had to drop out of that group, now Lipovets' legs are completely wasted because he had to work to pull Primož Roglič back to that GC favorites. Lipovets is not there to help ride the front there after Landa got done attacking with around 5 kilometers to go. So it alters the whole stage 15. And on top of that, Lipovets gets dropped. And guess who's wearing the white leader's race jersey? Carlos Rodriguez doesn't lose time to Lipovets. Instead, he gains time on Lipovets. So yesterday's stage, the officials allowing Primož Roglič to sit on the bumper altered the whole stage outcome too, and certainly helped Primož Roglič when Lipovets got back on the front and started drilling it with under 5 kilometers to go when Landa was done. So when you start looking at yesterday's stage and you go all the way back to the meeting in the bus, when the director sportif saying this is no problem, we'll just pull over to the right side of the road, we'll switch bikes and he'll be right back onto the front group, that is not what happened in yesterday's stage. Now before I let you go, I want to talk about one more thing, Felix Gall. What happened to Felix Gall? We're sitting in the top 10. Well, remember, he is the teammate of Ben O'Connor, the race leader's red jersey. We have seen Felix Gall drop Ben O'Connor and go up and take time on Ben O'Connor, and not help Ben O'Connor save time on the general classification. I told you I was more or less okay with what was happening with AG2R, mainly because Ben O'Connor is leaving AG2R, and I don't believe he can hold the race leader's red jersey here at the Vuelta a España unless, like I told you, Primoz Roglic goes bad, or of course they keep having some more knucklehead tactics as we've seen throughout 15 stages already here at the Vuelta a España. So yes, Ben O'Connor may win the Vuelta a España, but Primoz Roglic has to do some more mistakes in order for me to see that happening. So when Ben O'Connor was getting dropped and Felix Gall was going up the road, we know now that Felix Gall went bad on yesterday's stage 15, and he lost 26 minutes. He's out of the top 10. It's dead and gone. But where did he have his bad ride? Well, I take you into before they hit the first Category 1 climb, the peloton split in half, and Ben O'Connor and Felix Gall are in the second group of that peloton, and we see it's Trek and AG2R chasing like crazy. We start the first KOM climb, and I back it up about 4 kilometers. Those two guys are still at the back. Once the climb starts proper, Ben O'Connor is at the front, and Felix Gall will find his way to the front, and I'll fast forward it all the way in to the third climb of yesterday's stage 15, the Category 1 that they're doing twice. As they're going over the top of the KOM, Felix Gall's on the back of that 70 group rider and starting to descent. Now, I read some articles and some different websites there where they say that he got dropped on the descent. Well, he did officially get dropped on the descent, but when I'm sitting up here on the podium here beyond the coverage, I think Felix Gall had bad legs. Maybe he's sick. I tried to find something. The most I could find that he put out there on Instagram or whatever it was, he says it was just a bad day. I always hate when they don't tell you what's happening. When something's good happening, they tell you all about it. When something bad, they ghost you. But we did at least get where he said it was a bad day. Well, as he goes over the third KOM there, he's dropping down the descent. Once they come off the descent, he's no longer at the back of that group of 70 riders, so he's been dropped. You would say could be bike handling skills. I can't argue that. Certainly could be. But if he's at the back of the 70 rider group after going over such a hard climb like that Category 1 climb, I got to believe he was already sick. When I show you there at about 115 kilometers to go and the peloton split in half, and he's at the back, in wrong positions throughout the whole beginning of the stage 15, and then not there at the descent of that final descent of yesterday's stage 15. I don't think he got dropped because it was a descent. I got to believe his legs aren't good. He's not healthy. It was going fast and crazy with the group splitting in half going down that descent. He didn't have the power to pull himself back on is what I got to believe it is. Could it be his descending skills? Absolutely could be. But Felix Gall, I got to believe, must have been having a bad stage 15 and not feeling well. Either way, now we go back and look at Felix Gall's ride where he dropped Ben O'Connor. You got to say, ooh, we'd love to have those seconds back if you're Ben O'Connor wearing the race leader's red jersey. Absolutely. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys for tomorrow's stage 16. Another summit finish here. Should be a marvelous stage. Like and subscribe. I'll see you guys real soon.